Morning. Good morning. Good morning, people of LinkedIn. Good morning, YouTube. If you're watching, good morning, Sunaina.
Good morning, Cheryl. How are you today?
I am good, thank you. How's your week been, Sunaina? Before we get into last week, how has this week been?
Great, but busy. Really,
Yeah,
really busy, but good.
yeah,
Full of very different things going on for my
yeah.
clients. Good things. So yeah, how's your
Good,
week?
good. Do you know what? Obviously, we had the summit last week, and we're going to talk about that. So a lot of this week has been decompressing. A
Yeah.
lot of it has been decompressing and unpacking and processing, which it actually takes me a long time to do because, straight away after the summit, normally I just go into planning for next year mode. Like that's how my
I
brain
know
works.
you.
Yeah. And then it takes me a couple of days to almost like and breathe, and kind of just come down and whatever. So I've been doing a little bit of both of those things this week, really. Yeah.
Were you like that immediately after? So from last
Mm,
Friday, or did
yeah.
you? Because I was absolutely wiped out after the
Yeah,
event.
from Friday. From Friday, I'm like, right, you know, what's this? What's it? Yeah. Probably because I was very energized by, it felt great. And, you're just like, right, this is amazing. How do we keep this thing going? And how do we, kind of honor the individuals that came and the space that was created and all of that? So I almost felt like fired up to be like, right, what's next? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I know your energy, so I completely see that. And to
Yeah.
that point, like, I think what you've created is truly very special, not just in who's there, what we talk about and everything, but that we have that space to talk about whatever we need to. I know
Yeah.
sort of on the comms that goes out, you've put, dress code, come as you are. And literally people did body, mind and
Yeah.
soul. They had the
Yeah.
conversations they needed to, they built the connections they needed to, but they had safety to either
Yeah.
ask questions or, discuss topics. It's great. I mean, kudos to you for sure.
Yeah.
Good morning, Julia.
Good
That
morning,
is so
Junior
funny.
Beaver. Junior, we need a name for you. Sunaina, we
Oh, it's
need a name
coming.
for
Now I've
Junior.
seen this, it's coming.
Yeah. Junior, if I was going to say actually, and good morning to anybody. If you are listening to this live, please do say good morning. We're talking about the ERG Leader Summit that we had last week. Good morning,
Morning,
Andrea. How are you
Andrea.
doing? If anybody wants to join this, can I do
Oh, can you do
I've got
that?
my phone. I can. If anybody wants to come live into the studio and join us and give us your thoughts, please drop me a DM. Drop me a DM and I'll see if I can multitask well enough. I will send you the code to jump on here live and join myself and Sunaina, because obviously we are talking about the ERG Leader Summit that was last week in London. We're going to be unpacking that. So we've got Junior Beeman on, who is the global lead for the multicultural network at NatWest. I had to think then, my brain was like, and we've also got Andrea Southall on, who is the one of the leads, or I don't know whether you've got co-chairs, Andrea, for I'm going to say maybe it's the Pride Network at RICS. It could be called Rainbow. I'm not sure.
Well,
'Cause I
Andrea's just
sometimes
going to
get them
have to
mixed
come
up.
on up and tell us herself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so I'm going to keep my DMs on my eye. Good morning, Pauline. Help with my FOMO. Don't dare put me on live. I'm in my PJs sorting the washing. I wish I
That
was
would be
doing
great.
that. Yeah. Yeah. That would be good. Yeah, we could that's a whole different sort of live, Pauline. That's going to be almost like as Sunaina was saying, we sort of said come as you are for the summit
Come
last
as you are
week,
for
and
the live.
that would be a LinkedIn live. Come as you are. What are you doing? What are you doing this Friday morning live? Yeah, if anybody wants to join us, especially if you were there last Thursday, if you want to jump on, or if any of the topics that we get into, because what we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing a little bit of a recap of some of our favorite highlights and maybe one or two of the things as well that have come out of the feedback. And thank you to everybody that sent in feedback. I'm always banging on about how important it is, especially for employee networks, for example, to get feedback after events, right? So we did a survey literally the day after. And so, we will be sharing some of that feedback. So if anybody's got any thoughts or any questions about anything that came up, this is the space. If anybody doesn't know Sunaina, if anybody does not know Sunaina Kohli, Sunaina, do you want to intro yourself?
Apart from being
apart from being the original bad girl, yeah.
Of course. So I'm a DEI strategist. I've been in this work for about, I think it's 16, 17 years now. Delivered this work right around the world across sectors, industries, geographies. I really love this work. It really is so important to me. Very sort of purpose and values led personally. And now I run The Human Difference. It's my own consultancy. It's really about bringing human connection back into the workplace, because I think the essence of the work that we do literally boils down to be a good human. And from there, we can build so much together. So that in a nutshell is me. I do behave most of the time, but I do have this mischievous side. But it just means that working with me is that little bit more fun.
Absolutely. And if anyone's not connected to Sunaina Kohli, Kohli, please do go and check out her profile. And I'm not sure people realize the breadth of your experience, especially your global experience, which I think for a lot of organizations, especially those, for example, that are like maybe headquartered in the US, and we had a lot of conversation about that at the summit, right? The challenges that brings, even for organizations in the UK. And obviously we're potentially facing our own headwinds as well, right? But Sunaina's got a lot of global experience, which is really useful. So let's start with the highlights. And again, if you're watching this live and you were at the summit, please do drop your own personal highlights in as well. I know that we've got a couple of, obviously Junior was the panelist, Andrea was a moderator this year, but please do share with us your highlights or your key takeaways. So I'm going to start with you, Sunaina, and start maybe with some of the talks. We had some amazing individual speakers sharing their stories. So Sunaina, the bad girl with the good heart, some of your recollection and highlights from some of the individual speakers that we had. We had speakers from a breadth of, so for somebody like Pauline, who was talking about her FOMO, just to recap, we had a breadth of speakers. You can actually find them on ergleader.com/schedule, but we have speakers from, individual speakers from the BBC, from Mia's Men. We had a speaker called Vicky Yaffe talking about time hacking, so how to get more time in your day. Lucy Wilson talking about the importance of making events more accessible for individuals who are neurodivergent, which is so useful and practical for individuals that are running ERGs, right? Good morning, Neha. Neha says, hello, boss women. Great to be here today. Still reeling from the highs of the ERG Leader Summit. So your recollections, your highlights, Sunaina, in terms of individual speakers, anything that really stood out for you?
I mean, come on. So I'm a note taker. I'm old school. Sometimes I'm on my phone, but definitely pen and paper. And literally our first speaker, Nick, just, I think 3 words out of her mouth. And I was like, wow, I was not expecting this. I don't know. Is it right to say that her presentation was done in spoken word? Like, was that intentional? Because that's how I heard it. It was incredible how she delivered it, her language, how she I've got a quote that I mean, do you want to go through the essence of it before I just drop my quote?
No, go to the quote.
She talked about the work, the weight that we carry and how we show up ourselves. But where she started with this was to say, and please forgive me if I've got this wrong and it's not verbatim, but along the lines of, our ancestors sow the seeds of the forest they may never sit under. And that literally had me. And then she talked about, and that's why what we do, how we do, is so much more important than we really can comprehend.
Yeah.
And I really took that on board. And I thought that is so true, because we're constantly being told, you know, our ancestors paved the way for us. But she just so poetically put that together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I haven't experienced that at a conference before. Yes, if you go to open mic, but she was very special.
Yeah, she was incredible. And and obviously she was talking about you know, the struggle that's involved when you're doing this sort of work, you know, and she called it, I think the talk was called The Silent Struggle of Advocacy. And it's, you know, when you are advocating for others, which you are, you know, when you're leading ERGs as well as yourself, that there is a lot of I mean, we use that term emotional labor, you know, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it, as well as then the other kind of labor of actually doing you know, the change management, the leading, the bringing people, all of that. But there is this really deep kind of emotional labor because of the nature of the work of it. And she just captured it, you know, beautifully. She really did.
But then we're carrying our own as well. Right. As well as taking on that emotional labor for others, whether whoever we're supporting are part of our community or not, or we're an ally just by humanity, we are carrying our own too as we help them. And then I guess that leads to a little bit of advocacy fatigue, which is a word, a language I think came up quite a bit. So I think there's definitely throughout the day a lot of thought put into taking care of ourselves as much as we take care of the people that we represent.
Absolutely. And it's one reason, you know, that obviously Nick's talk was one of the first talks in the day, but it's one reason that you know, that I asked Lisa Ardley Price, who is you know, a network leader at NatWest, gender lead, to bring us some, you know, some mindfulness and reflections, because there is that actually quite difficult side to this work, right? And so I would hope that even just, you know, that little bit of grounding and breath work that we did, I kind of hope that, you know, maybe even in the week that we've just had, if somebody had like a tough day, you know, maybe they literally took, you know, 5 minutes to do a little bit of breath work, you know, to do a bit of 4-4-4, you know, breathing in, pausing, you know, breathing out, pausing. Do you know what I mean? I just really hope that people would take that away, because of, you know, exactly linking it to what Nick was talking about, you know.
And I remember last year as well, you started the day off with that, Richard started the day off with the walk along the canal. And we've had a lot of people from last year come again this year. So I think that diversification of what taking care of yourself can look like is really important. But I hope it served people well through their work.
Yeah, definitely. And then the one panel that I mean, the one talk, sorry, we're going to go onto the panels in a minute, right?
That panel.
We're going to get onto that panel. But in terms of the talks, I have to talk about Hardev's talk.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know,
it's so interesting because you just don't know who you're talking to or who you're sharing a table with or anything. And he was at my table, you know, got to speak to him, his colleague Tanya, lovely people, you know, and then he gets up and he tells us his story. And I was just blown away. I was like, my gosh.
And his story was powerful in terms of his own challenges, you know, with you know, mental health, mental well-being, etc. You know, absolutely just mind-blowing, you know, as an experience. But then that prompting him, which, you know, we see this a lot with networks, right? People start it because they see a need. And, you know, he obviously had experienced something personally and then was like, you know, I can help other men. And I've seen this a lot, particularly with men's networks. And even somebody like, say, Richard that was hosting with us, Richard Loftus, you know,
Hi, Richard. He better be up watching this.
He, you know, started his own men's mental health charity because of his own challenges. And I love this about the work that's going on at the moment in men's spaces. So, you know, Hardev talking about his own story and then that encouraging him to then start a men's network. And how great as well to have that talk supported by somebody in HR, because sometimes there can be a little bit of that in between ERGs and HR, right? So to have HR, Hardev's on. Oh my gosh, Hardev, we're talking about you. Good morning, Hardev. Hardev, if you want to jump on the live, you might have missed it. I've invited. There's an open invite onto the live. If anybody wants to jump on and share, your sort of reflections on last week, please do drop me a DM on LinkedIn, not on my emails because I can't do 3 bits of technology. Drop me a DM on LinkedIn. I will send you the link if you want to come on. But yeah, so really great, in terms of the work that Hardev is doing with the Men's Network.
And I think just listening to him again and also knowing Richard's work, it is so important to have as many ERGs as we need, right? Because to represent everyone's voice journey, there are still organizations where you go in and they're like, oh no, men don't need anything. Hello. Yes, they do. Because there's still that sort of stigma attached that, a certain demographic or the majority population are all right, they're fine. They don't need representation. They don't need to have a voice, but they do. And even if that is because of the mental health support, everyone's conversations are very, very different.
Yeah,
and something that Hardev said was, and this resonated both from a gender and a culture and a faith perspective, that he didn't know how to talk about the things he was going through when he was going through his worst moments. He didn't have the language. He also didn't know how to identify what he was experiencing. And in different aspects of my life, I can relate to, it's very often not until after such a big moment of crisis or an event that you start talking and learning, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what happened. I think that's why community is important, because in that moment where you don't have language or understanding, there will be someone to support you. So definitely don't write off majority populations needing community.
Exactly. I'm just circling back into the comments. So good morning, Dilwyn. I hope you are well. Dilwyn is one of the chairs of the, I think it's called the Multicultural Network, but I could be wrong, at RICS. Dilwyn was obviously there as well last week. The mindful yoga was really good, helped set the tone for the day and helped intake everything that happened after better. That's really useful. To know as well. And Andrea is saying that she is not camera ready, right? So if you join this 5 minutes before, you would have seen one day I am going to do a get ready with me LinkedIn live. I'll be putting my makeup on.
Absolutely. I've definitely taken some tips from you this morning, that's for sure. Thank you, Pauline.
Men's ERGs are a must do. Absolutely. If you're asking why they are not a minority, you need to learn more. Richard Reeves' Boys and Men is a great book, or Movember is a great site. Exactly. And with you're right, Pauline, with Movember coming. I mean, obviously we've just come through was it Men's Mental Health Week, I think, recently, but we've got Movember coming up. But organizations, if you're not doing anything around men's mental health, you absolutely need to be looking at this. Hardev, I'm still so inspired by last week, and absolutely, Sunaina, someone said to me last week, how did I tackle the issue with my culture and mental health, given in the Asian community it's unspoken of? It's down to us as the next generation to change that narrative, for sure.
It is. And it may only be that based on culture and faith, that the workplace is that place where you can get that community right now. So again, more reason why this work is important.
Good morning to the amazing Lucy Wilson. We Lucy, you might have missed us recapping your talk about which is so vital for all employee networks because they all do events, right? So Lucy talking to us and giving some amazing practical tips around making events more accessible, but also gifting the summit with the slow clap.
There we go. If you've got no idea, please reach out to Lucy and find out what that's about.
We're gonna leave that. Please reach out to Lucy if you want to know the gift that she gave us, which was the slow clap.
But Cheryl, while we're talking about Lucy, I did have this to raise for today. You know, the work
Yeah.
she's doing, it's so valuable to organizations, events organizers, anything events related, because
Yeah.
you know, especially with the ERGs, we talked about different ways of maintaining that sort of people coming back, bringing new people and what have you,
Yeah.
and growing and expanding, because you always need to recruit new bodies to support and help with the work. But, you know, one of the, I think, reasons that following or attendance drops is if the events that you do aren't put together in a way that's supportive of neurodivergent individuals, it's very difficult for me to want to come back to the next one and the next one. And I think that Lucy gets ahead of that game. You know, she helps folks be proactive about how they're putting things together from the get-go, from communications before, you know, the event even takes place, right through the event. I think one of the things you did this year was literally from the train station to the venue, a video of the route helped me so much. And also, I think there's the universal design. So you may design for neurodivergent individuals, but actually everyone will benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I heard a couple of people comment that was a really cool video. So small things do make a difference. And I think that's where Lucy's sweet spot is. And obviously she's ex-ASOS, and like we all turned up.
Yeah.
to the event.
Yeah. And there's definitely, you know, and thank you so much, Lucy, you know, because we had a couple of conversations before the event, and there's still more that even we could do, right, you know, with the making the event more accessible. But yeah, really, really invaluable session. We've got a hello here. I've had to look on my LinkedIn from Caden Shake. Sunaina, hello, you're an amazing person for equality.
If you need strategy work, Caden Shake is a business development genius. Amazing. Worked with him in the Middle East in PwC. But yeah,
perfect. Let's get on to the panels. Let's talk about some of the panels. And so for anybody that wasn't there, we had first of all, what I'll say is when we were analyzing the feedback, I threw the feedback into ChatGPT, obviously, and Claude. So I use those two.
It would be rude not to.
And Claude, who, if anybody uses Claude, they will know that Claude is often the deeper thinker, right? So Claude, of our panels, Claude basically said that the panels last year, or like the topics were like, you know, good sort of like foundational topics. But Claude was like, this year you advanced the complexity and the challenge that the panels were tackling. And I think you'd agree with that, Sunaina, right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. And I think we've really moved with the times. I mean, this world moves so fast. Yeah. Even in the space of a year, think how different our conversations in this work have been. So yeah, Claude's right.
Yeah.
Hats off to Claude.
Yeah, Claude is right. Hats off, Claude. You earned your corn. Claude earned his money. So some of the panels that we have. So for anybody that wasn't there, we had a panel about the challenges of trying to do this work all yourself as an ERG leader, which is very common, as in, you know, having a lack of volunteers and team around you to help with the work. So we talked about the lone leader. We had a panel about the importance of collaborating with other ERGs, other departments internally, external organizations. I'm all about the collaborations. We had a panel purely on that. We had our senior leader panel. Right at the end of the day, we had some exec sponsors, head of D&I now, a global head of D&I who was an ERG leader at one of the big four, is now doing like head of D&I. And we also had that panel. So the panel that Sunaina moderated. So tell us about that. Tell us about that panel, Sunaina.
Yeah. So what we were doing is basically trying to understand how ERGs are managing some of the very tough but also very delicate socio-political conversations, the humanitarian crises going on right across the world. These are hot topic conversations. Are they being had? If so, how are they being had? How are ERGs owning the conversation, whether it's at the community level or whether it's the business getting engaged, and also the appetite for accommodating those spaces.
Yeah. And just to for anybody that wasn't there, just to kind of give you more examples of, because these, you're right in terms of these being hot topics. I mean, there's literally, it's stuff that's in the press now, right? And literally, we sort of designed that into the schedule like at the end of last year, and little did we know how more relevant it was. So some of the topics that came up, and then I'll hand over to you to just like maybe give your thoughts to it as the moderator. But some of the topics that came up obviously was some of the political stuff going on in the States, and what that has meant for some of the ERGs supporting their members around things like immigration in the States, and all of the detentions that are happening over there. Obviously, there's been the UK Supreme Court ruling on sex and gender here in the UK. I'm forgetting something,
but disability rights as well.
The disability rights, the right to the assisted dying bill that's literally just going through, the changes to disability benefits, all of these things that are affecting the general society. That is all being brought, and credit to the ERGs that have created such a safe space that colleagues feel comfortable to come to the ERGs and raise these things, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, credit to the ERGs.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think they're not just reactively supporting, just as example about proactively supporting. As chair of her disability inclusion network at ASOS, she has made it a fact to have hot topics, let's say, socio-political topics on every meeting agenda, regardless of whether, it's a particular topic, just that we discuss it. How's everyone doing? What's happening in the news today? What's the update on the trans rights bill? Like, what is going on in our world? And I think that's really important, because you're enabling not just safe space, but brave space conversation. And I think when you normalize that it's okay to have healthy conversation, that sort of culture will overflow out of the ERG and into the place more broadly. And that's the thing, when we keep quiet, and the silence is a killer, because it's hurting people who could be impacted, but also it's creating a culture saying taboo, 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 we don't do that here. But if it's healthy conversation, and there was so much healthy conversation at the ERG Summit, so I think they're doing a great job there, all of them.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that we had the answers for everything, because we didn't. We certainly, but what we talked about, some of the really good takeaways, and credit to the fact that on the panel, the panel that you led in particular, some individuals that obviously have been through many of these things, going back even to the George Floyd killing and Black Lives Matter, right? So we had a really nice experienced set of ERGs that could talk about the kinds of things that can help, and also talk about some of the guardrails. So, I love that Junior talked about, for example, the importance of working with PR, comms, external affairs, because you've got to be really careful of all of that sort of thing. And also somebody mentioned the importance of like having expert support potentially as well, right? So because some of these issues can be quite traumatic, so don't suddenly become almost like, don't try to become like the mental health expert that's going to like manage all of the, these can be quite tricky conversations. So
without a doubt. And I think that probably leans into something Niharika pulled up, which was this really resonated well, because she said when the George Floyd murder happened, in the aftermath, we all had to sort of, we had to moderate panels, speak, do this, have a perspective, and no one was trained for that. So she even said, like, media training, what is your public speaking like? And we always think about being part of an ERG is an opportunity to upskill and develop your capability. I think that's one that we really need to look at even more, because you ultimately do become the voice of your community at some point in this capacity.
Absolutely.
And so it's really important. But I mean, that panel, everyone was tremendous. They showed up. And the interesting thing, they all brought something very, very different to the conversation. Even in prep, they didn't overlap. And I found that quite interesting as well.
Absolutely.
So many conversations happening.
Yeah, definitely. Andrea has said here, so there were three leads from RSS did a bit of a debrief of the event during our ERG Leader quarterly catch-up this week. Well, what great timing. And we shared our takeaways with the other networks, and it's given us all a lot to think about in terms of what changes and new things we can do together. Amazing. Can't wait for our deeper debrief next week. That's fantastic. Nat here. Good morning, Nat. Nat has said, we begin all of our meetings with a social value moment, allowing space to talk about topics openly. I love that, Nat. So actually, it's like you were saying, Sunaina, social value, putting it on the agenda, because it also gives people a chance to check in. It's a way of checking in. You can kind of like gauge where people are, right? Neha said, I'm grateful to be a speaker on that panel, as you call it, hot topics, so key topics. Thank you both for brilliantly pulling it together. Yeah.
Can I just raise one thing? So Cameron and Junior sort of brought something to the table that was quite valuable in that they both have sort of had change of leaderships during their tenure as ERG chairs. And so we were talking about how do you navigate that, because the leadership set the tone of how brave or safe you can be. So their thoughts were interesting, but picking up from that and subsequent other conversations through other panels and speakers, I realized that I think we're coming into a new wave of CEOs, or certainly across the C-suite. I think the new generation of execs is coming in at the top. And rather than waiting to be invited in or dragged in, they're actually proactively approaching ERGs, or they're proactively engaging in conversation, because they get how important that social value piece now is. Thank you for that language.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. Junior has said, one thing I took away is the value of networks and networking, learning from each other. If it's not working, get networking. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that in the survey feedback as well. I think somebody literally said that as a result of the ERG Leader Summit, they connected with somebody on the day, and they're going to be working on something like, after the summit. Like it's literally happening, which is great, right? Especially when, we know that budgets are tight and all of that sort of thing. Good morning, Hansa Pednagari as well. Yeah. So, definitely an opportunity for networking. Let's talk about the fireside. Go on.
Oh, God.
No, go on. You finish up.
I was going to say also ERGs within the same organization have to be collaborating because of intersectionality, right? You can't have one individual turning up to 6 ERGs. If there's an opportunity to have blended connectivity, it helps people show up as well.
And that's one of the things, actually, before we move off the panels, it came out of, there was one of the panels where they were talking about collaboration, and I want to say, I think it was Kate Jervis from AstraZeneca. She was saying that she looked after, I think, the early careers ERG, and they were often they were often encouraging their members to volunteer for other ERGs because early careers people are really keen. They've maybe got a lot more time on their hands, all of that sort of thing. So they encourage them to support other ERGs. And I was giving an example of a client I did some work with recently where, when people join the organization, they are auto-enrolled into the new careers ERG. Like they're literally auto-enrolled, right? So when this ERG leader talked about that in this session with the other ERG leads, I just saw the light bulbs going off, because they were like, okay, this is like the pipeline, and I was like, you should be signposting all of those individuals that have been auto-enrolled in the new starters ERG. And they do great things. They do site visits. Also, it's fantastic what they do, that ERG. But they should then be funneling them into other ERGs, right? That's a brilliant way of like keeping it fresh and everything.
Because it's great for the individual, right? Because then they've got their new body system set up and they're navigating their way. But it's great for the ERG because like that's new thinking coming in. You don't know the greatness that's happened in their previous organization. You want all that new input. It's so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk really quickly about the fireside chat, which and Nat has said, I missed the summit. Nat said, I missed the summit. We'd love to know about any future events. We're definitely going to come on to that. I mean, there's next year's summit, which the date is already locked in the diary. It's the 18th of June. And the website is ergleader.com. ergleader or one word.com.
Did I behave? Am I invited back?
You're definitely invited back. but there will be other things coming up, Nat, that we're going to be talking about. So there'll be other things in the second half of this year that we'll be talking about. The fireside chat. So let me set this up for anybody that wasn't there. So Sunaina had to step in actually because unfortunately somebody that was going to be in the fireside chat, which was Samantha Francis, who is head of benefits and also an ERG lead, she was going to be doing the fireside chat with Richard Cootie from And Digital. And the reason that the fireside chat was talking about ERG leader careers, particularly as some ERG leaders do, thinking about, do you want to move into DI full time, which is what some ERG leaders do. And that's something that Richard Cootie has done. Part of the reason we were going to have Samantha Francis on is because she had that opportunity to do that. And she decided to stay in role, stay in her specialism, basically. So that was it. But Samantha couldn't make it on the day, and Sunaina, you kindly stepped in. But what are some of your takeaways from that particular conversation?
That Nigerian families and Indian families have a lot in common. Period. That's what I took away. I mean, we only had. You'll probably say. You'll probably recap it better than me.
So here's the thing. So for anybody that wasn't there, so Richard actually was talking about the challenges of explaining what he does to Nigerian family or Nigerian parents. But it was so interesting because he talked about the pressures from certain cultures of going into certain careers. And it's called, I don't know whether you've come across this term, Sunaina. It's called, I've heard somebody else call it, I think it was Dave McQueen actually. He calls it the migrant four of careers that you're allowed to be. And that is doctor, engineer, accountant, lawyer. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the migrant four. Like if you're not doing one of those, it doesn't even count.
It don't matter. It doesn't matter what you do, literally. If it's not that, who cares? Is how our families look at it. Like, and what? You didn't make it.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I wasn't actually expecting him to bring that cultural overlay to moving from, a kind of more, potentially more what's maybe seen as a more scientific area, which his area was data and analytics, into kind of D&I. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah,
he did it so well. Because so my question was, how do you tell people what you do? Because I always struggle. It's so interesting. I met someone yesterday and I'm trying to give her this flowery version of what I do. And she went, do you mean DEI? And I went, yeah, DEI. Because normally if I say DEI, people are like, what? Diversity, inclusion, familiar, Trump, yes, no. So now I just, as I said at the conference, I just tell people, I show leaders how to be kind so that people are happy and the business does well. And then that starts the conversation. Yeah. And he went, I just tell people I'm in HR. Yeah. And that is where we got started because HR is like in our families. But it was lovely to see the connectivity.
Yeah.
I think, given that he's a data professional before coming into this role, I loved what he said because we all talk about data and the importance of data and we need it for the business case and to prove to our leaders the importance of this work, but not everyone knows about storytelling with data. And so Richard really gets it. And that's where I thought, yes, now I see the fit because data is important. But, random data on a slide is powerful, but it's even more powerful when you join the dots and tell the story about the data that isn't there. So it's not just, 40% are happy. What about the 60%? Tell me about them. Break that down. What's the demographic? Yeah. And I feel that's what he brings to his role. Yeah. He clearly seems to be in his element. He's loving the transition and of career paths. But I enjoyed that one. And given that we had literally 6 minutes to prep that conversation, it went well.
Yeah.
What were your takeaways from that?
Some of my takeaways were around, and this is something, you know, because I've known Richard now for a couple of years, and something that he's talked about is it's having the awareness levels of skills and knowledge gaps. You know, when you're going from being an ERG leader into like a broader DEI role, because obviously now you're not only advocating now for one community, for one anyway, you've now got a broader perspective. You're actually looking after now the whole organization, which links back to what we were saying earlier about it doesn't matter whether somebody's in the minority, the majority, whatever, you're looking after the whole organization now. Absolutely. In terms of inclusion. But then, his his level of awareness around what's the skills gap now. So what's my training need as a professional to be able to do this job well? And one of the areas that he talked about, which is something I've been really delving into the last couple of years, is employment law. Like, it's massive. It kind of, and we've seen it with the UK Supreme Court ruling, right? Employment law really, really kind of almost like sits at the heart of this work in a way, not that it's the be all and end all, but actually ultimately when all is said and done, that's kind of the thing that you can lean on to kind of almost like get people to do the right thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the benchmark almost. So that bit I found really interesting. Yeah, and
it's not about being the expert, as we said in that. I think it's about knowing enough to know, because it's what you don't know that could sort of, put holes in your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's just knowing enough to be able to deliver well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what Pauline has said here about the storytelling. And there is something about I mean, I'm obviously my background is finance, and and when I was in finance, for those that maybe understand like finance roles, I was doing board support. So, using a bit like Pauline was saying, you almost like using that data to help tell stories of how is the business doing and actually what's the future. And there is something about, we always talk about, networks, and in this work, the importance of data, but being able to interpret the data and, as you say, tell the stories and challenge it is probably even more than just the data. Otherwise, the data is just data, right? How do you turn it into insight?
Absolutely.
Is the real challenge, right? Let's go on to, we had a 1 minute pitch, which was new for this year, right? So the 1 minute pitch.
That was brutal with the clock countdown, by the way. I do have to say, people are naughty.
That was the AV guy, I think, just added that on. He was amazing.
Hello, Colin, if you're watching.
Hello, Colin. And that was part of that. So for anybody that wasn't on, we had ERG leads pitch as though they were pitching to a senior leader and exec sponsor, and they were pitching to our panel of executive sponsors and senior leaders for support, for something they're running or for an initiative or an event or whatever, for 60 seconds. So almost like replicating if you literally bumped into, a senior leader at the coffee machine or in the elevator or whatever, how do you, sort of like explain to them what you're doing and ask them for support. And so we did that. And then there was a prize for, in fact, they all got a prize.
They were brilliant. By the fact that they nailed it in 60 seconds. And quite eloquently. They did well. Absolutely. But that was super interesting. I wonder if we do more of that or expand on that a little next year.
I mean, certainly, I think if people found it valuable, and obviously, what I'm talking about, and actually, because we're going to get onto now community, networking community, and I think I said on the day, I've started using this term rather than communities of interest, it's communities of impact. Right. So how do we get employee network leads, first of all, really being crystal clear and articulate about the impact that they have in the organization, for their own members, for colleagues, wider colleagues, for the organization, etc. And how can they articulate that such that they are seen as communities of impact, not just like a social club where people go and eat cupcakes, right? Do you know what I mean? So that's really the key for me. But there's something about community, and we had a lot of people talking about, we've seen some of that in the comments today, the power of bringing people together in person and creating community.
It's really important, that in-person piece as well, because some of those organic conversations that just happen in that moment, even now, like people are coming up with ideas, that is human connection, right? That is where magic happens. And again, I mentioned it earlier, comparing notes with those outside your organization is so important that you don't fall into that bubble and think this is good because you're someone else is great may just help you amplify your work. Otherwise you're just cruising on good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress that more. I know that some organizations have like in-house summits, or all of the ERG leads get together once a year, and that's great, right? But there is something that comes from external perspectives. I tell you what as well, there's something that comes from understanding in particular how other networks are being supported by their senior leaders. Because if you are in an organization where dare I say, all of the sponsors are a little bit, sitting back or a little bit horizontal, right? That's a nice way of putting it. It can be really powerful to come somewhere and hear how, what's working for other networks in terms of getting that senior leader support. So things like that, you're not necessarily going to hear that if you're just in, if you're all looking internally, right? And sometimes people just don't have these sorts of honest conversations.
Absolutely. And I think the power of going back and saying, I was at an event or networking opportunity and our competitors so-and-so are doing this. FOMO is a thing at the exec level or at the sponsor level.
Absolutely.
People want to, like, everyone's hungry for those likes on their LinkedIn post, let's be fair. And it's human nature. But even internally, I think once you've got to give them an itch to scratch. And so when you go out and come back with tangible, like solid facts of what's been done, how they're doing it, and where their impact reached, that's a real conversation to be had with leaders who are maybe just cruising and enjoying the view.
Definitely. Let's talk about what's coming up next, because we're way over how long I normally go for. Let's talk about what's coming up next. I mean, we are, as I said at the start of this, I was thinking about what we would be doing next year, like on Friday. It was like, okay, like, how do we level this up? What does the community need? How do we do that? And I know that people are asking us, how do we maintain community? And if anybody's got any suggestions, please do let me know, because this is something I'd love to crack in terms of if I could figure out how to keep the sense of community going in between the summits. A lot of what we're trying to do is part of that. But any ideas that anybody's got, great. But we've got ideas around the summit itself as well. But what's coming up for you, Sunaina? What are some of your thoughts? I know you were sort of talking about CEOs and what you're seeing and where your head's at the moment going forward.
Yeah. So as I excuse me, I've got allergies and they're really affecting my throat, the hay fever and stuff. So I think touching on earlier the point around how our leaders are changing, how this new generation is coming in. I do a lot of strategy work, but there seems to have been some of my work that's branched off to actually having meaningful time with leaders at the C-suite, at ERG sponsor level, to help them build their capabilities to be able to shine in our work, because they hear about words like compassion, empathy, safe space, but they don't always know how to apply it. And leaders, I would say, since COVID, have never been granted safe space to be able to ask some of the questions I think that we're taking for granted. The conversations we were able to have, they may or may not know how to contribute in a way that looks safe for them. And I said it at the start of the summit as well. We all expect safety to be granted to us, but we forget we owe others, by sheer matter of community, to give safety to them. And I think leaders have had a hard time, and it's a very unforgiving environment for them. So just organically, my work has has focused a lot, I would say, over the last 10 months
on
helping nurture their, let's say, DEI capability to be able to then support their organizations, support their ERGs, but also influence their peers. And I think that's really important work. And as you know, the best work happens behind the scenes, right? And then it comes out in the spotlight for 30 seconds, but it took a year to put together. That's our life, and that's fine. But that's what's happening for me right now, that building in those foundations for leaders to be able to say, and maybe get braver about the socio-political conversations as well. They just don't know what that looks like at the minute. So that's a lot of my work right now.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, you know, we are planning already about next year's summit. But if anybody has any ideas, maybe we'll sort of like bounce a few things out to one or two of you. But I know that some of you will have known that we did a survey at the start of the year. So we did a survey of ERG leaders, really talking about how ERG leaders are set up, how networks are set up, and what work, you know, trying to kind of like really sort of benchmark what works and highlight what looks good and some recommendations and things like that. So, you know, if you haven't seen the output of that, it's on ergleader.com under the resources. You can just like download the report. But we're going to be doing another survey over the summer. But the survey is going to be of predominantly DEI. It's predominantly aimed at DEI and HR leaders that look after ERGs, talking about some things. So, you know, look out for that. I mean, obviously, if ERG leaders want to take part in that as well, they can do. But we're going to be doing that over the summer. And there will be another webinar.
It's going to be good.
Follow up for that as well. It's going to be a good one.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, so we will be doing that. And it may or may not be coming to an area which may or may not be London as well, because I know some people are saying, when are you doing things out in the regions? So yeah, it may well be going to a town near you.
Oh, right. Cheryl, maybe we could do a tour, not just that town.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. Yeah, well, potentially. Yeah, I never thought of that. We maybe could do that. You know, if anybody wants us to, we are potentially looking for somewhere to, I mean, I was literally, and actually in my inbox, I've got to have a conversation with somebody that potentially wants to host a webinar. But if any of you want us to come to your organization to share the results of that survey when it's out, drop me a DM. You know, get in there first. We'll do a handful of freebies with that. Maybe I'm roping Sunaina in potentially. So
if there's cake, I'll be
if there's cake, if there's cupcake. Chocolate. Once we've got the results of the survey, maybe we do a little bit of a tour. We can come in and share the results of that.
Yeah.
But those
red
those
velvet
are
or chocolate, I'm there. Let's do it.
Yeah, those are things that are coming in. So we'll be surveying over the summer. So you can be telling your, you know, HRDI leads, if you're out there listening, you know, to kind of like look out for that. And then later in the year, we'll be coming out with the results and the recommendations. Pauline, I love this. When I was in Shell, our sponsors were asked to mentor a committee member. This was rooms most would not get into as they were the most senior person in a location. It was excellent. I love that idea. Asking sponsors to mentor a committee member. I absolutely love that.
And that's reverse mentoring that will come into play, right? So
yeah.
That's really... By the way, Pauline, are the dishes done? Has she done the dishes? Because she started off doing. I hope they're done. It's been a while now.
So one of the things I found useful to keep my network engaged and understand what they want was to do a focus group where people from the network showed up, discussed and unraveled what was bothering them or what their pain points were in the organization, which helped me set up the strategy for the network. Love it. Co-creating the strategy with the members. Absolutely. Whenever in doubt, I always go back to the focus group and I use that to prioritize the budget and what we choose to do. It's so critical because so many ERG members talk about, you know, oh, I'm struggling to engage members. Ask them what they want. As Richard says, not this Richard, sorry, another Richard. Give the people what they want. Richard Jefferson. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This is such an important conversation. Richard, you are a joy. I feel like Richard. Are you?
Richard needs to come. The next,
Richard, hopefully you're due to come on a live.
Yeah,
I'm hoping. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. Do you do virtual community check-ins to keep your community going? That's a good idea, Pauline. we don't is the honest answer. But I think maybe,
She has
as I was saying,
the
laundry. It was the laundry that she's saying. I think you're right, Pauline. We do, we haven't quite cracked it, but virtually, I was doing something like this actually about a year ago. I was doing like almost like a monthly call for any ERG leads that had like been through some of the training that I'd done. So maybe I need to bring that back. If anybody wants me to bring back a monthly kind of community check-in call, put it in the comments or drop me a DM or something. Richard's saying he just needs a date and time. Richard, I need to send you a link. I thought I'd sent that to you already. Maybe not. Maybe I was allowing Richard to settle into his new gig before bombarding him. Okay. I think we're out of time, Sunaina, because we've been going for like nearly an hour. The only thing we haven't talked about actually is learning labs, but I know, to be honest, neither of us went to them. But I know that they were fantastic because I know the individuals that we had. And so just for anybody that wasn't there, we had a brilliant organization called Blue Goose. I had heard them talk at an event where they shared, it was that they actually played a video. I don't know whether they played it at the summit, but they shared the work that they did with Royal Mail to roll out the bullying and harassment campaign. It was phenomenal. And I just thought these guys get it in terms of communication, change, all of that, how you influence change. They were talking about comms for ERGs as well, and culture change. We then had somebody from an organization called Swoop Analytics. If you haven't heard of Swoop and you've got Microsoft Viva Engage, you really need to check them out because they talk about how to do communities in Viva Engage, right? So if you're using Viva Engage as a platform for your ERG, you need to check out what it is that they do. We obviously had the amazing Every Mind at Work talking about ERG leader burnout right at the end of the day. We had hopefully nobody was burned out from the day. And then we had the team from, was it Takeda or Takeda? I think it might be Takeda, talking about collaboration across ERGs and how they have these co-lead roles that look after collaboration. So that was really interesting. Pauline, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be wrapping things up, but
we did our cups as well. Don't forget.
We did our cups, Albatross Arts, creative reflection and thinking about how we kind of like, how we keep our cups filled up, because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? For next year, learning labs may or may not stay, but I'm not going to share yet one of the things for next year. I love keeping surprises, but I know that in terms of for
that's another live conversation.
Share it. It is. So more to come about next year. But if you want to keep up to date, please go on to ergleader.com. Make sure that you've got access to any free resources and stuff. There'll be more things coming out this year. But yes, the date for next year's summit is in the diary, and you can actually now get tickets at this year's prices if you actually want to do that, and they'll be transferable. So if you're no longer the ERG, they can be handed over to anybody else that is the ERG at the time. Any final thoughts from you, Sunaina? Final words? Where can people find you? Where's the best place to connect with Sunaina if they want to find out more about you?
I think LinkedIn is good for me. Drop me a message, follow. Ask even questions. Sometimes people just need a bit of comfort or some guidance. I'm there for that. So if you are sort of stuck with something, by all means reach out. Never a problem. What was I going to say? I'm really looking forward to next year. Even this year, with the things that we've talked about offline that you're planning. I'm really looking forward to it, and the reveals, because I know this community that you're building are going to be so excited about the new work.
Absolutely. There's going to be, and the one thing about next year, there's going to be a lot more about collaborations. That's all I'm saying. There's going to be a lot more about collaborations. And it's all. We're hopefully going to be facilitating collaborations in the room, like live in the room. There's going to be a lot more about that. Perfect. Thank you all so much for everybody that was there last week. Thank you again for coming, for sharing your insights, and for being vulnerable as well. There was a lot of vulnerability on the day, so thank you for that. And thank you for being with us for the last nearly an hour. If you've been watching us live, and if you're listening on the replay, thank you for spending some time with us. And that's it. We're out of
Happy
here.
weekend.
Yeah. All right. Happy weekend, everybody. Take care. Don't forget sunscreen. Okay. Ciao. Go with Grace.